My name is Adam B. Levine. Like I said before, I do a twice-weekly show called Let's Talk Bitcoin. It's really important that we solve the problems that are in front of us, because there are a lot of problems. I think that they're solvable, and so that's actually what I wanted to kind of talk about here, is how we're solving some of these problems and how it's happening in a way that doesn't require permission, which means that it's happening really fast. Things move fast in the world of cryptocurrency, and since I started Let's Talk Bitcoin in April of 2013, we've seen regulatory compliance that completely reversed the compliance landscape. Companies come and go, and we've seen the conference scene completely explode, with at least one a month and sometimes as many as 4 a month happening all over the world. Over the last few days, we've seen the apparent demise of the Silk Road, the ubiquitous Bitcoin illegal stuff market, and the arrest of the man accused of operating it. And the price just was crushed. And then it wasn't. Why is that? Mt. Gox, right? The elephant in the room when it comes to centralized Bitcoin exchanges. In the crash and the week-long freeze about 2 years ago, some of you might not have been in the community at that point, but there was complete chaos. Nobody knew what the price of a Bitcoin was, and most people had their Bitcoins tied up. It was a terrible situation. Because the single exchange serviced a huge majority of Bitcoin's transactions, it was both an incredibly lucrative operation, but also a huge central point of failure for not just trading Bitcoin from one currency to another, but how we get the price in the first place. Bitcoin Talk. For a long time, it was the Bitcoin community. It was the place where people went to meet the community, to educate themselves, and to kind of dig into this project that we call Bitcoin. A couple of days ago, it was hacked, and when I checked it this morning, it was still down. There are a few similarities between these three events. First off, they're all controversial sites. They're ubiquitous, but everybody loves to hate the front runner. And amusingly, the Silk Road of those three companies probably has the best reputation. They also don't matter. Now, a year ago, 6 months ago, this would have been a very different conversation, a much more depressing topic. But the free market's at work here, and while in the past these events would have crushed their various niches, and that's contraband for Silk Road, price and liquidity for Mt. Gox, and community and thought leadership for Bitcoin Talk, their success actually catalyzed and incentivized the next generation. So what we're seeing is that these high-profile, ubiquitous, and in their own way centralized operations are arguably just as dangerous to their users as new players. They may have more reputation, but that makes them a more tempting target for both bad actors, just as it does for new users. Even in these fields we view as dominated by one or two players, increasingly that won't be the case. These things don't matter anymore because there are alternatives that are just as good, if not better, in their offerings, who've been waiting for that vacuum left by the failure of what have become our legacy institutions, are too big to fail. Except in a monopoly-free system like Bitcoin is, there's no such thing as a too big to fail. And really, these are companies that are just standing there as almost roadblocks where they have this momentum. And the momentum with a big company a lot of times is enough to keep you going and enough to keep your customers happy because there's a cost to switching. But that's not the way that things are going to go. These institutions were the first, but they're not the last. You know, Silk Road has 3 or 4 similar competitors who are already fighting over their customers. Gox is arguably less impactful now than ever for the price, as far as most people are concerned. And you know, I mean, my favorite price source is Bitcoin Average right now. I think that the guys at Invictus Innovations are working on a very interesting pricing model, but right now I'm still using BitcoinAverage.com, and it actually has a button up there that you can select that completely excludes Mt. Gox from the price list, from the pricing equation. And of course, Bitcoin Talk, you know, I mean, Bitcoin Talk for the longest time, that was the only place that you could talk about it. And now, I mean, Reddit surpassed them. I think they have about double the number of users. And if you've gone to Reddit in the past couple of days, you've probably seen it's going actually really slow because most of the people who are still on Bitcoin Talk have moved over. You know, that might be a temporary thing, but it's definitely happening. So the point is that where there used to be one voice howling against the wilderness, we don't live in the wilderness anymore. The entire ecosystem and Bitcoin and cryptocurrency are growing up right before our eyes, and it's happening really, really fast. I'm privileged to devote nearly all of my time to cryptocurrency, and I've really never been more excited than I am, you know, in these last couple of months. I think that we have a lot of challenges ahead of us, but mostly mostly it's permission-based. So it's been said before, the US has a choice in front of it. We can choose to embrace this technology and see the future and be a vital part of building it. Or we can do everything in our power to try and make it so this is hard, and we'll probably do a good job of stopping it from legitimate uses in the United States. and then get left behind. So the problem with open source projects a lot of times is that there's too much availability of workable solutions that don't do the job in a way that's accessible to people. This is especially true with the Satoshi client, I think. We're just now starting to see these newer wallets come out that really can leverage and take advantage of just some of the basic usability work that's been done over the last few years. So these problems are going away. There's a wallet that's coming out called the Hive wallet that really has a focus on usability and kind of, again, tries to continue this trend of amplifying the Bitcoin experience where anybody can, immediately get into sort of a buzzword. But it's really not this hipster thing. It's what needs to happen. We need to focus on usability. For buying products, BitPay is a major player in the space. But at the same time, they weren't trying to reinvent the wheel, as Tony said, when it comes to how we buy things with Bitcoin. So to this point, most merchants accepting Bitcoin use that standard shopping cart flow, where you add a product to your cart, and when you're finished with all of your shopping, you enter your billing information, pay the total with either a credit card or via Bitcoin. But really, Bitcoin doesn't need anything like that. It's a workaround created to address problems associated with identity, because that is, of course, as has been discussed, how our money works. You have to associate identity, acquire authorization or permission, and then you're allowed to withdraw money from that, essentially. But with cryptocurrency, since the holder is the owner, we don't need to do that anymore. And I think that our payment solutions aren't going to require it of us because it isn't actually helpful at all. It actually creates more of a risky situation than you have if you don't do that. Shameless plug here. Let's Talk Bitcoin has a crew that is filming this event, and we're selling video passes. If you go to bitcoinvideopass.com, then you'll see our first implementation of what is called the Bit Credits system. The creator is a gentleman named Alexander who lives up in Canada, and he's been working on this for the last couple of months. It takes a look at this problem that we have of needing to associate identity, and it rethinks it from the cryptocurrency standpoint. Occupying about 1/3 of the page, and with the explanation text wrapped around it, you don't actually ever need to leave that page in order to make the payment. It just has a little interface up there, and it prompts you for the amount of money that you're going to put in US dollars. It gives you that amount, and then it tells you how much it is in Bitcoin. And you can essentially load this up with Bitcoin, where then we take on the exchange risk and give you back website credits that are denominated in US dollars, and you can buy anything on our system. Technically this talk is called Doing Business with a Deflationary Currency, and people think this is a big problem, because who wants to spend Bitcoins when they're hard to acquire and will gain value over time? There has to be a compelling reason, and after my experience with this Bit Credits thing, I want to share my trick with you. Charge people more who pay in US dollars. You can call it a discount for your Bitcoin price, or you can call it a surcharge for your dollar price, but if you want people to part with their Bitcoins for whatever you're selling, you need to take into account the future value of Bitcoin, because your customer certainly is. And if the mental math doesn't work for them, they're going to pay you in dollars, because why shouldn't they? For our passes, we offer between a 20% and 30% discount, and found that our sales are about 95% Bitcoin. Now, obviously, I do a show called Let's Talk Bitcoin, and we only promoted these to our audience, but, my experience has been that when I'm trying to buy something, I spend a lot of Bitcoin. We receive funds from our sponsors in Bitcoin, and we receive donations from our listeners in Bitcoin. And so when I go to spend, it really is a value equation for me, where I'm saying, okay, is it worth it to me to part with these Bitcoin, knowing that at a later date they're going to be worthwhile? And generally, I kind of demand like a 30%. Whenever I'm doing services with someone or hiring a designer or something like that, the discount is generally at least 30%. Sometimes it's a lot more. Bit Credits is one option, and I like it a lot because it essentially lets users play the market against Let's Talk Bitcoin. When they buy our on-site credits, all the volatility is removed from the equation. We denominate credits in US dollars, so you can make one transaction on the Bitcoin network to load up your wallet, and any commerce you do on the site is instant and transaction fee free. Right now, you can only buy these passes, which incidentally are heavily discounted over at our table over there, for attendees of the conference. But within the next week or two, we're going to roll it out to the entire site. And this is interesting because our show is supported by a mix of listener donations, about 75% of which come in at just under $1. So even in a Bitcoin paradigm, if you have transactions coming in that are under $1, and you have to pay a fee that's somewhere between 6 cents and 25 cents, by my math, it's usually about 6 cents. Then that actually winds up being very expensive, and it's almost, you're right back up there with credit cards. So there are, of course, drawbacks, By doing this, we essentially take the transactions off the blockchain and we centralize the records of value on our servers, which means that to a certain extent we have responsibility to protect them. But again, we don't have to collect hardly any information. For digital goods, we literally only need an email address. We don't keep the funds on our server. We don't keep the keys for our funds on the server. They go into essentially a black box, and then we pull them out. But there's no way to access them through the server directly. Eventually, the system is going to go both ways, and the people who write for Let's Talk Bitcoin, when they receive tips, they'll receive these credits that they'll then be able to cash out at whatever the exchange rate is at that point. So the entire time that we're holding, we've taken on that exchange risk, and I think that that's something that is really attractive to a lot of operations like ours, where we do have costs. I mean, I'd rather pay my costs in US dollars, and I'd rather keep my tips. It's really what it's come down to. So there are, of course, others who are trying to find this prize. The barrier to entry is really low here, and the payoff for whoever nails this content monetization question is going to be really big. So there are some other people who are doing good work in the area, specifically the bitwall.io people have a paywall application that's very interesting, and then Bitmonet, which is in partnership with BitPay. And I've been trying to get together with them to learn more about their project, but I haven't been able to make it work yet. So even this is a stopgap for where we're going. Projects like Watershed or eGora, which you're going to be hearing about more in the weeks and months to come, are creating frameworks to build new communities and economies entirely on top of, with cryptocurrency baked in at an infrastructure level. And I'm especially excited about a project called NetBend that, again, I want to learn more about, but you can think of it like a simplified cryptocurrency infrastructure that lets those wanting to build any kind of complicated service that involves a lot of money routing around or going to various places to essentially plug it in kind of like you would with a little starter circuit board, where like all the underlying wiring's there, you just plug in the various modules that you want. In expertise, as with everything else, cryptocurrency is a meritocracy. The people who are up here as experts, generally speaking, are because they want to be. Because they're passionate about the future we can create, and instead of waiting for someone to tell them what to do, they followed in Satoshi's footsteps and just did it. I've got a saying that I've been saying a lot. It doesn't matter that I do this now, but in 6 months, it will have mattered that I did it 6 months ago. I think that Bitcoin, that's really it in a nutshell. Everything is so positional right now, and to mix metaphors, we are arranging lounge chairs while the tsunami approaches, bringing with it a very different and hopefully a much better world. Thank you.
Hi, listener. Here at Let's Talk Bitcoin, we're building a global network of correspondents able to contribute on-the-ground perspective when cryptocurrency-related information comes across their filters. If you'd like to join our global conversation, send an email with your name and geographic or cultural niche to apply@letstalkbitcoin.com. Just like Bitcoin, the only barrier to entry is your time and good work. Thanks for listening.